What's going on, guys? JHoyt back with you today. Welcome back to some NHL 20 Hockey Ultimate Team gameplay. Hope you guys do enjoy that in the background, as for the first time in a little bit we are being joined by a special guest. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm just honored to still be called special at this point.
I mean, hey, you, Ben, I mean, you're basically the only two I ever make videos with, so you're pretty special to me. Anyway, so today we're here on NHL 20 mainly to kind of recap this past off season. Unfortunately, we couldn't do a recap of the playoffs like we usually do, but we're here to talk about some big moves, trades, signings, the whole shebang coming from this off season. So Chris, let's just go right back to it. How did you enjoy the Stanley Cup final?
I would have actually, to be honest with you, I enjoyed it quite a bit, due to my dislike for the Boston Bruins. Apologies to Bruins fans. I know a few that are good people. But I was really happy to see St. Louis get the cup instead of Boston, if I had to pick between the two. So, that was really cool. And, all the subsequent storylines, Patrick Maroon winning there from, in his hometown, Pietrangelo being the first captain in, a long time to lift the cup. For St. Louis, and then the whole story with the song Gloria, the little girl with cancer, Layla. There were just so many cool storylines, as there always is with champions. But it was just, I love seeing all that stuff because I'm a sap for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you nailed all the points. I mean, the storylines coming out of that series were incredible. I kind of was hoping Boston was going to win it, but that's because they've won it before. But it's good to see someone new kind of take home the crown of the best team in hockey. But what came out of, after all of the hype of the Stanley Cup final and St. Louis winning was a lot of moves. So the first thing is, we'll just start right off with all these RFAs, the restricted free agents that absolutely got paid. So I guess kind of first impressions of some of these contracts.
Well, I mean, honestly, I'm surprised that it took so long. I'm maybe not necessarily surprised. I don't know if that's the right word, but I was intrigued that it took so long for most, if not all these guys to sign. I know they were all kind of waiting for the first domino to fall, and once Mitch Marner got almost 11 per, I was like, oh boy, these are going to be some massive contracts because. And I know Marner's a very good player. He had, I think, 90-plus points this past season, and there was not a ton of guys who did. So to see him get almost 11 million, he kind of set the bar really high for the rest of these contracts. So I think that makes all the rest of the contracts look like huge bargains. You had Rantanen signed for 9-something. You got Braden Point signed for 7-something. Kyle Connor signed for 7-something. I know he's not quite on that super elite tier as the rest of these younger guys. Tkachuk was signed to a really good deal. He's probably closer to that top tier than the second tier. And then Ivan Provorov as well got a solid deal. So to see the number that Marner signed for and then see all the rest of these guys get a lower number. Line A as well signed for 6 or 7 something. I'm thinking Charlie McAvoy here was less than 5 per. So to see all these guys get signed for such low numbers, saying that with air quotes, as opposed to the Marner deal, it was really interesting. But at the end of the day, I'm glad we get to see all these incredible young players back in the NHL playing some more great hockey, and I'm really excited to see what happens this season. And another thing that a lot of teams did was they have lower salaries for the first few years or whatever, and then in the last year of the deal they have a higher number, so that way a qualifying offer at the RFA stage then is going to be higher for them as they enter their final years here, so they can get a higher contract. So I thought that was pretty cool. But like I said, I'm just excited to see all these great young players back in the league for another year.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said what point that I was going to make. said they took a while to sign, and that was kind of what I think everyone was waiting for, was that first, because they had probably like tentative offers on the table, and they're like, okay, we could agree to that, but then they're always just like, well, let's wait off for a second to see, what everyone else is getting, and then everyone just kind of kept waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Finally, I don't remember who the first one to sign one. I think it was Marner, but he just kept going on, and it was like, boom, and now they all start falling off, and you heard the numbers from Chris there of all the different contracts that they absolutely got paid. And a couple of years ago, you heard of a bridge contract that was like a 2 or 3 year contract, like $2, maybe $3, maybe even $4 million, and then a couple years later, then they get paid after that. But these guys are just going right to, like you said, Marner, $11 million, 0.7 something, and the rest of the guys right around that mark. And it's like, these are no longer bridge deals. These are almost just short-term deals to make sure you can maintain that level of production, going forward. And a lot of these guys are going to be, big-time players upcoming this year for their teams.
Yeah, like I said, it'll be interesting to see, what happens with these guys. Another thing I wanted to point out, the NHL, we always hear it's like such an old boys club, so to speak, where like it's all these guys who have been in hockey for a really long time, and they all kind of have this like unwritten rule, with offer sheets and that kind of stuff. But I thought it was interesting. There was only one offer sheet actually signed, and that was for Sebastian Aho from Montreal. So he was the only one to actually put pen to paper on an offer sheet. But I saw like a couple other agents said they turned down deals that were offered by other teams because they wanted to stick with the same team. So that was interesting to see as well. So between that, and we weren't really going to talk about this, but the RFA situation with all these, pretty good players being waived, and then only like 2 of them get picked up by another team, was just kind of like, all right, I see what's going on here, but like it's kind of boring. Like, can we get some sort of excitement going on here? Come on, hockey. Like, what are we doing? So
yeah, definitely agree with you there. And that kind of leads into kind of our next topic. And we're going to be talking about New York, New Jersey. Not complete turnover, but a lot of interesting pieces joining these teams, whether it be the draft, and we'll just get right into it, obviously, with Jack Hughes, #1 overall pick for the Devils, then followed by Kakko. I don't remember what his first name is, but Kakko for the Rangers, center and a winger, top 2 for each of these teams. And you just keep going on from there. A couple other big pickups. Obviously, PK Subban from New Jersey, along with Jacob Trouba for New York. So, we're kind of even here. A couple of young guys, couple of solidified defenders on that back end, along with kind of those Russian scorers, and Gusev and Panarin for the Devils and the Rangers there. And then a couple of should we call them wild cards? And we don't really know what they're going to bring this year, as far as Wayne Simmons for New Jersey, and then Adam Fox for those Rangers.
I mean, first of all, just imagine forgetting the Lord and Savior Kaapo Kakko's first name. New York, hey, it's a nice city. What can I say? And you and I, did this before off the video, but we might as well, get back into it. So we were kind of comparing these 4 players one for one, trying to see who sort of won, not to be redundant, but who sort of won the arms race here. I think we were pretty set. If I do say so myself, you can interject if I'm incorrect, but I think we kind of both agreed. I think we both agreed that Panarin was better than Gusev. We kind of had some differing opinions on Kakko and Hughes. Like I've said before, I think Hughes probably ends up with the better point total over his career. I think Kakko scores more goals. I compared it to sort of a Crosby and Ovechkin kind of deal, and I know Jack Hughes is an absolute sniper and can get his anytime he wants, so I get that. But just sort of comparing center to winger, the different nationalities, the different play styles of the two, I think Kakko is better now, and like I said, I think Hughes has the higher ceiling. But with that being said, I almost feel like Kakko has the higher floor. So it'll be interesting to see those two as rivals for many years to come. And then Trouba and Subban, if we're going 5 years down the road, Trouba I would take Trouba every time over Subban. But right now, they're pretty even. Their cap hits are close enough. And then, like we were saying, the sort of wild cards in Simmons and Fox. We only say that because they played different positions, and we're kind of unsure what role they're going to play on the team. Adam Fox could play second or third pair of the Rangers. He's obviously going to be behind Jacob Trouba. And then we were saying Wayne Simmons. We were trying to figure out the Devils' lines here, and we both agreed that he'd be somewhere in the middle six, whether they put him on that second line or swap him with Bratt on the third line, whichever one. So I think it overall is pretty even, but I think the gap between Panarin, I almost said Panera Bread, the gap between Panarin, I mean, he is the bread man, so I wouldn't have been wrong, but Panarin and Gusev, I think the kind of gap there gives the Rangers the slight edge in the specific 4 players here that we're talking about in the arms race, so to speak.
Yeah, and you kind of nailed it. I mean, we obviously we talk a lot off video. Obviously, that's we were talking for like almost 3 hours before we even started the video.
3 hours on the Skype call, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we've been talking for a little bit. Whether it was about, I mean, we even brought other teams into this, and we got the whole 9 yards before we actually started preparing for the video. But it's just, even Gusev, obviously, he was under Vegas for a little bit, didn't really play for them, or I should say didn't play for them, but then he gets traded over to New Jersey for a second and third round pick, which isn't too terrible, but then you just don't know what he's going to bring. Obviously, had some success, I think it was over in the KHL, but is he going to translate to the NHL? If he's going to put up 50, 60, maybe 70 points, then we're maybe talking about similar situations with him and Panarin. But until Gusev hits that level as Panarin, then it could go back and forth on who actually won this arms race. Now it's not official. There was no official okay, who's better now. But it's just a good talking point because both teams haven't had the great last couple of years. Kind of on a decline. Older goalies. Sometimes inconsistent. At least more on the New Jersey side. Obviously Hank Lundqvist over there is still dominant. Not really, but sort of. And it's always going to be a comparison, obviously, being rather close in location. Always had a little bit of a rivalry there, and it's interesting to see that now. I don't want to say in a rebuild, but pretty much in a rebuild for both teams. Some inconsistencies there as far as goaltending for the Devils with Schneider and Blackwood. You never know what that's going to be over on the Rangers side. You got Lundqvist and I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but Gorgiev.
Georgiev, I think that's just a J as opposed to a G, kind of GIF, peanut butter and GIF video.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's all, up for debate, obviously. Chris being a Rangers fan, myself not so much involved as far as a fan base goes here. But two pretty good arms race, pretty good additions for both teams. We'll have to obviously see how all those guys play out this year. But any kind of last thoughts on New York and New Jersey here before I move on to some trades?
Yeah, just do me a favor and don't ever speak about Corey Schneider in the same breath as King Henrik Lundqvist. Thanks.
I mean, I did admit he's been struggling. I mean, can't really get too much away from that. But anyway, let's get right into the trades. Of course. Now, I do have them in front of me, so if you're curious, Chris, of who the actual trades were, if you don't remember, I can obviously tell you. But so the first one we'll kind of go over, and then we'll just start right at kind of the beginning of the name category here. We got Tyson Barrie leaving the Colorado Avalanche, along with Alex Kerfoot in a 6th-round pick. Heading back the other way goes Nazem Kadri, Cale Rosen in a 2020 3rd-round pick. So overall, the kind of first thoughts on this, I guess I'll go first here. The Maple Leafs kind of had a huge makeover on defense. Now they also got Cody Ceci from Ottawa. So now they actually have a couple of decent defensemen. Now they also, I should say, let go or whatever the situation was with Jake Gardiner. So now you have 2 more, I guess, decent defensemen there that can put up some points on that back end. Alex Kerfoot, I don't really know too much about him, but I think he was kind of that middle 6 role, 6th-round pick. Obviously, we don't know what that's going to be. But then Nazem Kadri kind of gets out from, under the kind of shadow of Tavares and Matthews, and now he goes over to Colorado, where I think, unless I'm forgetting somebody, he'll be their 2nd-line center.
Yeah, definitely.
So now he's always been, I hate to say it, but he's been a good player, but he's always had that dirty side to him where people haven't liked him just for that fact. So if he can kind of get away from being dirty and actually show his skill and his like ability to be a good player, he could actually really succeed over in Colorado, especially behind that first line, I guess we'll call it a trio, that's on top there. And I don't really know too much about Cale Rosen. I think, is he a defenseman? I'm not even sure. But that third round pick, obviously a little bit higher on. But what's your thoughts on this one?
This is one of those, I don't know if it's rare trades, but this is one of those trades that I really, really like for both teams. I think, obviously, we know Toronto had a huge hole on the right-hand side on defense, which is why they overpaid for Gusev, and then eventually acknowledged their mistake, and not Gusev, Zaitsev, pardon me. Zaitsev there, they overpaid him massively and then realized their mistake and traded him for CC, like you mentioned. So I think this is one of those rare trades where it truly makes sense both on paper and like in reality for both teams. As we've mentioned, Colorado has a huge hole at forward in general behind their elite top line, so Kadri can immediately come in on that second line and solidify their middle six area, and whereas Tyson Barrie gives the Leafs an option to, I honestly think they'll split up him and Morgan Riley. I kind of envision a Barrie and Muzzin pairing where Barrie can just have a leash or a long leash to play on offense, and Muzzin kind of takes a step back from the point production role and is more of a stay-at-home guy. So I think that makes sense and is pretty even for both sides. And then with the other guys going the opposite way, Kerfoot gives Toronto another good young forward, and Calle Rosen gives Colorado another good young defenseman. So the prospect-ish type guys, I don't really think makes sense, because I feel like Toronto has a lot of good forwards already, and then Colorado has a lot of good defensemen already that are young. So that part doesn't make as much sense, but as far as the headliners in this trade, it makes a heck of a lot of sense for both teams, and I think it'll play out well for both of them going forward. Also, I think Nazem Kadri is going to benefit from the PK Subban effect, and what I mean by that is, as soon as he gets out of a jersey that people love to hate, I don't think he'll be scrutinized quite as much.
Yeah, I kind of like that point, because that kind of happened with Phaneuf as well. So
to a lesser extent, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say Phaneuf was as quote unquote dirty as you I like to call Kadri and Subban. So from that aspect, I think is where more what I was getting at there.
Yeah, I mean, either way, hopefully he gets away from that dirty side, actually becomes that player that he actually has shown over the years, and hopefully it works out for both teams. But the next one we'll go to a little bit more recent than most of them happened. Was it a week or two ago now? So the defending Stanley Cup champs, the St. Louis Blues, got even better with getting Justin Falk and a 5th round pick from Carolina in exchange for Joel Edmondson, Dominic Bach, I don't know, and a 2021 Bach. Okay, so 2021 7th round pick as well. So they get a top 4, or what should be a top 4 right defenseman, and a pick in exchange for, could be a first line guy, could be a third line guy, could be anywhere in your lineup guy. Edmondson, along with Bach, who I think is a prospect, and then another pick in this one as well. So let's hear your thoughts on this one first.
Well, I mean, all of us armchair GMs have been screaming for, 2 years now, for Carolina to trade a defenseman for a forward. They traded a defenseman, but got a defenseman back, so from that point it doesn't really make a ton of sense. But I love this trade for St. Louis because, I mean, more than anything, it just makes their defense even more insane than it already was. I think this is going to be sort of a permanent thing for Colton Parayko to move to the left side, or have him and Pietrangelo kind of float back and forth just on the same pair, and then Justin Falk gets to step in there on the second pair with Vince Dunn maybe, and sort of completely solidify their top four, which, like I said, was already fantastic defensively. And then Carolina, while they didn't acquire a forward in the trade, they did trade for Eric Howla. They signed Ryan Dzingel in the offseason. So I think they made enough moves on forward and brought in a guy in Edmondson who, like you said, can play anywhere in that top six. So I think this is another trade that works for both teams, and I think both teams are going to be better for it, which is scary to say with St. Louis given that they just won the Stanley Cup, but I think you have to look at them as an absolute possibility to go back-to-back. And then you were asking me about Carolina before the video. I think they got even better despite getting rid of Falk. You know, I think Dzingel and Howla come in and solidify their middle six, and I think their defense, while Falk is a huge piece, I don't think their defense really took a hit because it just means the rest of the dudes in the 4 to 8 defenseman range just move up, and I think they're stacked in that area anyway. So I think they'll take a step forward as well. And like I said, St. Louis should be 100% considered contenders for the Cup going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree on a lot of the things you said. Obviously, one thing you did miss, Jake Gardner is now on Carolina as well.
Yeah.
So that kind of fills in a gap there that they didn't really have, but kind of did at the same time. But then the other thing I don't like about this trade is before, when Kevin Shattenkirk was on the St. Louis lineup, you know, he had, you know, two really good right-hand defensemen, and then Shattenkirk ended up getting traded away. But then now you have Parayko, who's obviously a very solid player, and now you add Justin Falk, and it's like, is there going to be too many stars on this defense in order to work? Now, obviously, you already talked about it, Parayko could move over to that left side, or you run 3 right-hand defensemen and just have a really solid lineup, almost like a similar look to Winnipeg when they had Bufflin, Trouba, and who am I forgetting? And Myers. So it could be, you know, a similar look to that, or you know, I could just be completely wrong, and Chris would be right in this one, where you move Parayko over to that left side, and then you have Falk, Pietrangelo, and then Vince Dunn and whoever the heck the other defensemen are. So it could work out really well. Like you said with Carolina, as we were talking, you know, did they get better? Probably, because they got, you know, another defenseman in there, plus they got Jake Gardner, plus Ryan Dzingel, Eric Howla. You can go on and on. So did they get better? Most likely. But I guess, well, again, like usual, we'll have to kind of wait and see. But a really good trade overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And now it's funny that I said the Barry trade kind of worked out for both teams, which was rare, and then we're talking about 2 other trades that worked out pretty well for both teams, so maybe it's not so rare, but then again, maybe we cherry-picked the trades, you'll never know.
Then the other trade that kind of involves Carolina in this one, they actually traded away one of their young guys, Adam Fox, to the New York Rangers in exchange for a 2019 second-round pick and a 2020 conditional third-round pick. Now, let me just say I'm not exactly sure what the conditions are on that. So, Chris, since this is your team, let's hear your thoughts.
Well, Josh, I also don't know what the conditions are, but I think Adam Fox is going to be a tremendous addition. We know what he can do on offense, and I think playing with, whether it be Hayek or if Brendan Smith plays defense instead of right wing, I think they'll complement each other pretty well, and I'm excited to see what he'll do offensively. And just to kind of lump in with the Rangers trades, I think the one for Trouba was awesome as well, because if you figure out all the moving pieces between the Rangers and Winnipeg, it ended up being Trouba and Brendan Lemieux for Kevin Hayes, which Winnipeg then turned into a 5th-round pick. So it's just like, it's really funny to look at, because Philadelphia ended up getting Kevin Hayes, which they hugely overpaid for. Winnipeg ended up with a 5th-round pick, no Jacob Trouba, no Brendan Lemieux. They made their 1st-round pick, which I think was Ville Heinola, or I don't know if he was the 20th pick or that was a different one, but if it was Heinola, he made the team, so I guess that did work out for them. But to see the Rangers get Trouba and Lemieux, like I said, for essentially nothing, was pretty awesome. And then to compound that awesomeness, they had a division rival overpay for a former player, which is going to strap them for cash for the next 7 years, which I think is hilarious, in the Philadelphia Flyers. So I like what the Rangers did. The whole chess moves, like I was trying to explain the best I could there. I think it's just awesome. I love both of the trades for New York, and like I said, I'm just really excited for all these moves they made in total.
Yeah, I mean, the Rangers have kind of had a complete overlook, getting rid of some of their longer time players, moving on to other teams, and now they got some younger guns in there. Could be a brand new start to another Rangers. I don't want to say dynasty, but Rangers, pretty good always in the playoffs type team. But we'll head back over, since we already talked about the Rangers. We'll head over to New Jersey now, where we already kind of talked about Gusev in here, but we didn't really mention PK Subban. I know we did earlier on, but the full trade, PK Subban goes to the Devils, and back to Nashville goes Steven Santini, who is basically like a third-line right defenseman, Jeremy Davies, who is a prospect, and a 2019 and 2020 second-round pick. So 2 picks there, a prospect and a third-line defenseman. And it is really good cap relief for Nashville. However, they filled up that, clear salary with another big contract. So I don't exactly understand why they would do that, especially when they're already really good. Then they trade away one of their best defensemen, which I get because you want to get, some salary cap. But then you go and sign Matt Duchene, which we'll get into in a little bit, what he means to that team for a big contract. And although I don't really understand it, the Devils really didn't give up that much to get him. So that's where I'm kind of really excited, because they give up, a defenseman who's kind of been like a 6th or 7th man for them, a prospect that I don't really know too much about, and 2 second-round picks for a top-line superstar defenseman. So yeah, they had to get a bunch of salary on their books, but they overall didn't really give up that much to get him.
Yeah, I totally agree here. Like you said, Subban is going to play really well in New Jersey. His cap hit is $9 million, but it is only for 3 years, which, assuming the Devils can re-sign Taylor Hall, they have a window here with all their young and exciting guys, as well as their acquisitions of guys like Subban, Simmons, and Gusev, where they're really starting to make a run for it in a Metro division where, like, again, we were talking before the video, in my mind, the Metro is Washington and Pittsburgh are locks, and then literally the other 6 teams I could see all finishing anywhere between 70 and like 90 or 95 points. So they're just going to beat the crap out of each other, and I don't know who the heck's going to finish where. But like I said, I do like the Subban trade for New Jersey, and I totally agree. They had to give up next to nothing to get a player of his caliber, so that's insane. And then also, as far as Nashville goes, like you said, they didn't have to, but they gave that allotted money to Matt Duchene, which shores up their forward core, but like you said, we'll get into that in a minute. But I think what this says about Nashville is that they believe Dante Fabro, their fantastic prospect defenseman, is ready to play in the NHL, and I think you're going to see him get top 4 minutes. I think it's literally as simple as Dante Fabro stepping into that second pair with Matthias Ekholm behind Yossi and Ellis, and I think it's going to work out just fine. I'm sure there will be some growing pains with Dante Fabro. I couldn't name a 5th defenseman on their team, but that top 4 is going to be great, and I think, to add to their forward core like they did, I think Nashville's going to be a great team.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I hate to keep using this phrase, but it's just going to be kind of a wait and see on what exactly all these teams are going to kind of, end out to be, especially with other new pickups, some, players that have been in organizations forever, now with, new teams. And that kind of leads us right into our kind of last trade, I think it is, that I have pulled up here, with Phil Kessel. And so he gets traded off from Pittsburgh along with Dane Burks, who I don't really know too much about, and then a 2021 4th-round pick. And then Pittsburgh gets Alex Galchenyuk, who is now on, I believe, his 3rd different NHL team, Still, I think he's, like 24, 25 years old, along with a former first-round pick, Pierre-Olivier Joseph, who's a young, like I said, defenseman. So is this going to be worth it for Pittsburgh? I mean, we were kind of talking about this again. Arizona's trying to go in that win-now mode. They've gotten a whole bunch of new players over on their side. And Pittsburgh, I don't want to see they just acquire random players, but this trade is kind of random in my mind, that they get rid of one of their superstars that, you know, was kind of playing that second or third line most of the time, and they get Alex Galchenyuk, who I think naturally is a center, but on this team, I don't know if he's going to be playing center because they have Nick Bukestad, I think, still as well. So you have Galchenyuk, Bukestad, like Rust, Getzel, Simone, obviously the two obvious ones in Crosby and Malkin. And then I'm probably forgetting someone here. But overall, a really weird trade for me. I don't really like that Galchenyuk pickup, only because I just don't feel like he's going to have a big enough impact to replace Kessel. Now, obviously, Kessel is a huge, you know, piece in his own right. I don't know. I just don't really like this trade. Maybe I'm just wrong, though, Chris. Am I just wrong here, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, the trade makes more sense for me from Pittsburgh's side as opposed to Arizona's side. I think Arizona sees this as a step forward for them, with getting an elite scoring winger like Phil Kessel, as opposed to having to play Galchenyuk now. Mostly from the Pittsburgh side here, remember that Marc Bergevin traded Alex Galchenyuk because he didn't think he could play center, and then traded for Jonathan Drouin, who he played wing and then tried to make a center. So that doesn't make any sense. But I think Jim Rutherford could trade for an actual dumpster, and he could put up 35 points on Crosby or Malkin's wing. So with a guy who's as skilled as Alex Galchenyuk in a high-flowing offense like that, I think he'll do just fine whether he plays with Malkin or with Crosby. So I do really like the trade from Pittsburgh's side. And then also, I think you'll see a chance for Pierre-Olivier Joseph. I don't know if he's old enough to step into the AHL quite yet, but even if he's not, he's a pretty darn good prospect defenseman. Maybe not top tier, but maybe in that second tier of prospect defenseman. So if he can develop like people expect him to, he should be a top 4 defenseman for Pittsburgh within the next 2 or 3 years, I would assume. And that's what makes me say even more that Pittsburgh won the trade. And then last point here, I guess Evgeny Malkin told Jim Rutherford, hey, it's either Kessel or me. And Jim Rutherford chose Evgeny Malkin, and he turned Kessel into a younger winger who is still unproven at this point, but I still think can get better and will play better in Pittsburgh. And like I said, a pretty good prospect defenseman, so I'd have to give this trade win to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, you're almost kind of right. With literally anyone you put on Crosby's side is going to produce. And it's really weird how you think that. That's why, like, Brian Rust got really good. Now not so much. Like Dominic Simone, Jake Getzel, I think I'm forgetting someone. Like Connor Sheary, I know he got traded away, but I mean, you're right. You could trade for like the guy that's playing in our local beer league team, and you probably would put up, 30 points like you said. So I don't understand how they do it over there. Something that I don't know if you saw or not, but I believe that Jonathan Drouin was revolving around in some trade rumors. So I'm not exactly sure how accurate that is. But it'd be kind of funny that Drouin gets traded off of Tampa Bay, goes to Montreal next, and then could be out the door again. Not exactly sure, but it's some of these players. It's I don't know what it is, but they produce like pretty decently, but then they get traded or released or whatever anyway. So I don't understand that one. But that's kind of it for all of our trades. Now we can kind of go into our big signings, and we'll start off with one we kind of already brushed on a little bit. Matt Duchene heads over to the Nashville Predators. I don't understand it, but Chris, what does this mean for them?
Well, I mean, they've been looking for a second-line center for quite a long time now. They thought it was going to be Kyle Turris, and they overpaid him big time think it was 8x8 if I'm not mistaken. Actually, that's the Johansson deal, so I'm not sure what Turris got, but I'm pretty sure it was an overpayment. But either way, I don't think he's quite good enough to fill that second line center role. He could be a second line winger maybe if they didn't want to play him at center. Could be an elite scoring third liner. But Duchesne finally gives them a second center to play behind Ryan Johansson, which I think is going to be huge for them. So I do like this signing for Nashville. Like we said, PK Subban was kind of the casualty and the cap to bring in Duchesne, but I think their defense will be okay. They get much better at forward. So I think this will work out pretty well for Nashville.
Yeah, that Turris deal was $6 million at 6 years, just to put that out there.
6 okay.
So, I mean, Kyle Turris, I wouldn't say is a bad center. They did definitely overpay for him. I'm not going to disagree with you there. But what was kind of funny was when Duchesne went to Ottawa, the big thing was they wanted Matt Duchesne, right? So they had Turris, they had Jason Spezza, they had Mika Zibanejad, they had all of these guys that they were so gung-ho on. And then to get Matt Duchesne, not a single one was there anymore. So then they get their Duchesne, but then who else is there? Nobody. So I don't know what Nashville thinks. I mean, will he be that second line center behind Johansson, or would Duchesne even be that first one and then Johansson would drop down? Not exactly sure how those lines would shake out, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of that deal, at least for Duchesne. I think he could go somewhere and definitely be that number one center. He's not, I wouldn't say a superstar. I would definitely say he's a star, though. I don't know. I just don't really like that one. But we'll kind of move on to the next one. We got Sergei Bobrovsky. I probably butchered that one. But he heads over to Florida. I don't really understand this one, where he's on this team, I think, pretty much his entire career. I think he was with what? Philadelphia. And then all of a sudden he's this thing in Columbus. Then obviously Panarin's gone. Duchesne's now gone. Dzingel's gone. Probably forgetting somebody huge there. But
Panarin, right?
Yeah, did I say him? Maybe I didn't. I don't know. But obviously Panarin's gone. So their big superstar is gone. So Bobrovsky now leaves. He heads over to Florida. Florida still, I don't want to say a bad team, but not really. I'm not super confident in them. I mean, they definitely did get better. They did pick up Brett Connolly. I mean, okay. Then they also got Anton Strawman. So they got a couple of good guys there. Now they have that elite goaltender along with a pretty, solidified, top 6, you'd say? Forwards, at least a decent to good top 4. A really good goalie, so maybe they could be playoff bound, but it kind of all depends on how everyone plays in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, I do. So there are two facts here, and these are not mutually exclusive. Sergei Bobrovsky is probably a top 5 to 7 goalie in this league, but he is also majorly overpaid. I think both of those things can be true and are true at this very moment. But, I mean, it's been this way for a while, where Florida, maybe not a while, but the past 2 or 3 years, they've been an elite goaltender away from being true cup contenders. The Connolly signing is kind of a head scratcher because he's probably best suited for a third liner, and they gave him a 4-year deal for whatever. But so that one was but I think the signing of Anton Strawman truly solidifies their top 4 defense. Now they have a legitimate top 4, and then some good guys in the third pair there. And then, I mean, they had Barkov and Huberdeau both over 90 points last season. You've got Dadonov there. You've got Trocheck there. So I think they have a lot of good pieces there. Like you said, I think they have a solid top 6, a solid top 4, and now they have that elite goaltender who, again, while he's overpaid, he's elite. So I don't think you have to really worry about it. But I think they see their window truly, like it's right now. You know, Barkov is in his prime, Huberdeau's in his prime, and they're only going to get better. So no matter who's playing in the bottom 9, you know you have those 2 guys in your top line to really carry them. and I think they will be in the playoffs this year. Like I said with the Metro, I think those other 8 teams not named Pittsburgh and Washington are just going to beat each other up. And I think maybe you see one, if not both, wildcard spots come from the Atlantic. I still think that I would put Florida below Tampa, Boston, and Toronto. But that means they're 4th, and that is typically good enough to get into the playoffs. So whether they're in that top 3 or whether they're a wildcard team, I do think they'll make the playoffs, and I think Bobrovsky pushes them over that edge where you might see them in the 2nd or 3rd round and truly being cup contenders.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, it's been a while since they've really had that elite goaltender. So, will it turn out? Again, I'm going to say it. We're going to have to wait and see. But the next, and I think this is the last one, I think, that I have written down that I can really see is, where to go? Dallas gets Joe Pavelski. And not just him, they also get Corey Perry. So, they lose Zuccarello to free agency, which, could be whatever. But they get Pavelski, who's been San Jose's captain for a little while now, and obviously been a key piece of that lineup. Same thing with Corey Perry. He's been a huge part of Anaheim forever, it seems like. And then they both go over to Dallas, and this I almost want to compare it a little bit to Colorado, where they have a really good top line, but then after that, who is the rest of the people? Like, you don't know. So now they get Pavelski, they get Perry. Just say you put them together on that second line, boom, you have 2 duos at least, and then you have Radulov in there that I forgot about. And then you have, I can't think of the one guy's name I'm thinking of, but you have like a relatively good top 6 as far as forwards go. On defense, you have what? Klingberg, Mathot retired, so he's not there anymore. Heiskanen, and who else is after him that I'm forgetting?
Does it really even matter? I mean, they're good enough.
Yeah. I mean, so you have 2 really good defensemen that I think are relatively young, if I remember correctly. And then you have those fill-in players that are there. And then you have Ben Bishop over on the goaltender side. So you have a pretty solidified team. Now, I would have liked Zuccarello to stay there because he definitely could have filled that top 6 role, but he heads over to Minnesota. So it's not really a huge signing, but it's still one we could probably mention here. And Pavelski, obviously, and Perry both bring some leadership to this team. Not like they really needed it with Sagan and Ben. But Pavelski and Perry to Dallas, Chris? What do you...
Josh, I really like the move for Dallas. I think Pavelski and Perry both bring veteran experience. They both bring playoff experience. And they bring well-rounded games. Perry has always been known for more of his offense, but I think as you get older, I think you become more well-rounded and sort of pay more attention to the mental part of hockey as opposed to the physical part of hockey, because while your body not breaks down, but after playing hockey for as long as these guys have, especially Corey Perry in this instance, the body takes the biggest hit, whereas the mental part is still there. So they can still think the game of hockey like crazy. So while specifically Perry may not be able to put up as many points as he used to, the mental side of hockey is going to be huge for them. Not that they really need another veteran guy like you mentioned, but I think he's going to be fantastic for them in a middle 6 role, as will Pavelski. And I think both of these guys are going to be able to lead their sort of young-ish guys on their forward core to a solid playoff run. Like I said with the defensemen, you've got Klingberg and Heiskanen, but it doesn't really matter who they have after that, because I think they split those guys up and they sort of each anchor their own pair. And then in case the other team's forwards get behind the defenseman, you have Vezina candidate Ben Bishop back there. So, I think it's going to be huge for them, like I said, bringing in veterans, being guys with a ton of experience who can still play a very disciplined game and can still put up a good amount of points to play in that middle 6 role, and they have an elite goaltender. So when you take all those things into account, I think the signings of Pavelski and Perry are going to be solid moves. And especially with Perry, they're one of the beneficiaries of this thing that happens to older players, where instead of their former team paying them a ton of money to continue playing for them, they're still being paid that money, and they've been bought out so they can sign the 1 year, $1 million deals, Kevin LeBanc style, and kind of, they don't need to get a huge deal, but they can still play a solid brand of hockey for a team who's maybe closer to contention and doesn't quite have enough cap space, because they are still being paid. So I think it's going to work for both sides there, and I think Dallas is going to be a really good team to contend with this year.
Yeah, I think they'll make the playoffs. I don't think they'll go far though, just due to some of the other teams being a lot more what would you want to call it, like solidified, I'd say. As long as you're like Vegas and teams like that, but I don't know. I mean, a lot of crazy deals this year as far as whether it be signings, trades, kind of the arms race with New York and New Jersey. Some teams, getting rid of some pieces, but then even getting better without doing anything other than a couple of signings here and there. And then you have some big name players that have been with some organizations their entire career, or at least for a little bit, going to new teams. And I don't want to say it's the year of the fresh faces, but kind of seems like that in a way. Like Duchesne, Bobrovsky, Pavelski, Perry, Barry, Kessel, like some of those guys, like Simmons, Subban. I mean, you could go on and on and on. Like even Panarin. I mean, he's only been with Columbus for like 2 years, for like 2 years. But I don't know. It's gonna be crazy. So I guess Chris, kind of last thoughts on this whole off-season recap and ready to get the season started.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's just a whole heck of a lot of new faces and new places. And while it may be weird to see some of these guys like Perry and Pavelski and other jerseys, you're going to have to get used to it, because a lot of these higher-end teams made some of these bigger moves, and it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun to watch this season. I think, as I get older, and I know I said hockey, at least from the management side, is kind of boring, I still get excited for the start of every single season. So I'm truly just pumped and ready to watch a whole ton of hockey this year. I cannot wait. And man, especially, obviously I'm a Rangers fan, so I'm just absolutely pumped. The Church of Kako is going to be serving out bread all year, and I'm pumped for hockey. I'm pumped for Rangers hockey, and I'm pumped for the season.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have said it any better yourself. Hockey is back. We're super excited to see what everyone's going to do this year, all these fresh new faces and new places, and I could not be more happy. So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on, recording with me, although we went probably double the time that we really were kind of shooting for. It doesn't matter.
Minor details.
Yeah. But, yeah, great video as always, Chris. Thank you for coming on. Any last words here?
I'm good, man. Just gonna go watch some hockey,
Yeah, it does actually start, in like 2 hours, I think, for us. So, as always, guys, I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, hit the like button down below. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. And as always, guys, we'll see you next time.